Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Today our lecture is about ISO 14000 and environmental management systems. Previously, we were studying the technical approaches which we were going to adopt in our cleaner production methods, and particularly with reference to our industries, uh, we studied what are the options regarding our uh, waste management, which is waste which is being generated from different units. It is in the form of solid waste, it is in the form of liquid waste, both, and also in the form of air. So based on that whole technical studies, now we are going to study what are the options we have for a management system, so that we can determine what our level of achievement have been obtained. Because uh, when we are going to adopt any methodology for the treatment, we are going to observe its results in the form of two major things, two major parameters. Those parameters are environmental impact, and secondly, the economical implications. If our approach for the waste reduction or wastewater pollution reduction or air pollution reduction are significantly having their impact on reducing the environmental negative impacts, and also benefiting the economical figures, that means our approach is going to be satisfactory, and we need to continue with that procedures. But if there is anything which is still lacking or which still needs some modification, in that case we need some revision. So it is a kind of assessment, it is a kind of auditing, it is a kind of a continual improvement mechanism. Earlier, in our very starting lectures, we studied how we are going to uh, assess these modifications, these changes, their impact. So it is a kind of the implementation of that assessment tools, and furthermore we will also try to uh, study what are the what is the impact of these implications on our trade and on our business activities. Because when we talk about sustainable development, it means we are concerned about the environment as well as the economy. When we need both economical growth as well as environment friendly technology, so that we can adopt, we can help it in our improved trade based on this sustainable development. So in one way or the other, it is going to have an impact on our trade, on our exports, and in our business activities. So in order to link our technological development, technological modifications with our economical developments, with our business activities, these ISO certifications play an important role. So now let's have a brief introduction to ISO 14000 and environmental management systems. What actually it means, what is its significance, how we are going to implement this in our industry and in our organization. As earlier we talked, it is not only applicable for our industries, but it is also applicable for our organizations, because we need to have a sustainable development in our organizations as well, in both manners, in regarding our environmental impact, as well as in our economical benefits. So let's start this topic, ISO 14000. Well, ISO basically is an independent, non-governmental international organizations, and almost every country is a member has membership with these standard bodies, which are going to implement it, because the international trade nowadays is not possible without the implementation of these certifications. So that's why every country which is interested in the trade have to get the certification done. So it is not only about environment, but initially it started with the business activities. We will also go through what was that and how it developed. So then we will move forward to environment. So we talked about it. These international standards make the things work. They give world-class specifications for product, services, and systems. So all these three things are important, because when we will be evaluating, when we will be assessing the system, we will be having the indicators which are related to the product, and which are related to the services, and which are related to the systems. All these things are related to the industries and organizations. Then we are also concerned with the quality of the product, with the safety of the product, and the performance of the product. So these things are also a part of it. Then what actually ISO has done, this organization has developed some guidelines for every aspect. So for example, talking about the environmental management systems, there is a complete guideline and toolkit provided by this organization. Once we intend to apply this once we want to get this certification, we try to implement those guidelines in our industry. So all those guidelines are already covering the major aspects, environmental aspects, secondly the safety aspects, and then furthermore the quality aspects, the services aspects, and so all these things are already included in those guidelines. So what are the benefits of ISO? ISO ensures that product services are safe, reliable, and are of good quality. For business, they are strategic tools that reduce cost by minimizing the waste and errors and increasing productivity. They help companies to access new markets, level the playing field for developing countries, and facilitate free and fair global trade. That's what we talked earlier. These international these international standard organizations actually going to bring a uniformity among all the products, services, so that there is a standard format for all kinds of products which are going to be involved in the trade. So the standards should be uniform throughout the word. Globally, these should be recognized. It should not be, there should not be any kind of discrimination between the countries areas or regions or industries, but there should be standard which is globally accepted by the countries which are involved in the trade. So, certification can be a useful tool to add credibility by demonstrating that your products or service meets the expectation of your customer. For some industries, certification is a legal or contractual requirement because without these certifications, the industry is not authorized to conduct any kind of business with other industries. So, how to start with it? ISO have developed some some kinds of certifications, and for every certification there are some procedures. For those procedures, some documentation has been done. Now those documentation is going to contain guidelines. Those guidelines are supposed to be followed by the industry or organization. Thus, there is supposed to have a uniformity throughout the globe, and every series is going to represent a typical specification. So, for example, ISO 9001 and ISO 14001 are specific for a particular purpose. So, we will talk about it later. And again, these are about the systems. Those systems which are responsible for maintaining the quality and maintaining the environmental standards as well as the quality insurance. If we talk about ISO 9000 series, it is specific for the business activities, while ISO 14000 series is specific for environmental activities or products or services. So these series are specific for their purpose. Then you can go through these things. First of all, let's learn how to represent it. So, it is more appropriate to demonstrate ISO 9001 and colon and then the year in which it was developed or it was modified and then certified. And this is the complete phrase for representing the certification format. Let's talk about what ISO 9001 2008 means, what it describes, what is its scope, what it is going to cover. So earlier, as we talked, 9000 series is specific for the business purpose, and so everything related to business, starting from the quality insurance to the labeling and then packaging, then designing and different processes, everything will be included in this series of ISO 9000. So ISO 9001 2008 is the title of a document that outlines the requirements an organization must maintain in their quality system. So that is related to the ISO 9001:2008 certification. There are several different documents, as earlier we talked. These certifications relate with some specific purpose, and for that specific purpose, that ISO has already developed the documentation. Now, that documentation is containing what? It is containing the guidelines, and what those guidelines are made for. Those guidelines are made to be implemented in that industry. So, uh, so 9001 relates with ISO 9000 family of standards, and is the most recent standard, and 2008 references the year of latest revision. So previously it was developed in 2000, and then we have some modifications, and in the latest version is available since 2008. The previous ones are now obsolete, no more in use. So only this 2008 version of ISO 9001 is in practice. So ISO 9000 certified is technically incorrect, and as ISO 9000 does not have any requirement, there must be some specific format. So for example, 9001 or 9002 or 3 or so on, whatsoever it is about. So simply ISO 9000 cannot be described as a certification format. So ISO 9001 defines quality management system, and is focused on meeting customer expectations and delivering customer satisfaction, so that you may pay attention to the customer, and then so continuous improvement assures your customers benefiting by receiving products that meet their requirements, and that you deliver consistent performance. So starting with the vocabulary, fundamentals and vocabulary of ISO 9000 standards, and then as we talked earlier, ISO 9001:2008, which contains requirements an organization must comply with to become ISO 9001 certified, registered. And then we have 9004, which was recently updated in 2009, which relates with managing for the sustained success of an organization. So these are some material about that. Now that was about the business and industrial activities which are related with the trade. Now ISO series, which is purely dedicated to the environmental activities, is called ISO 14000 series. Now ISO 14000 is a series of environmental management standards developed and published by International Organization of Standardization, ISO, for organizations, and it again provides a guidelines, a framework for organizations that need to systematize and improve their environmental management efforts. So it is on the similar pattern as we have ISO 9000 series, but ISO 9000 series purely focused on the quality of the product, quality of the design, quality of the service. Now, ISO 14000 purely dedicated to the environmental performance. So, environmental products, evaluation of the product based on the environmental impact. That's the target now for the ISO 14000 series. So, how it was developed? The most important format of and standard of ISO 14000 is ISO 14001. It is just in a similar manner as we have ISO 9001. That was for quality assurance. Now, this ISO 14001 is related to the environmental management system. Again, it is related with the environmental performance, environmental insurance in terms of its impact. So, similarly, we have some other options like ISO 14004, which gives additional guidelines for good EMS and more specialized standards dealing with the specific aspects of the environmental management. The major objective of ISO 14000 series of norms is to provide practical tools for companies and organizations of all kinds looking to manage their environmental responsibilities. The ISO 14000 series is based on a voluntary approach to environmental regulation. The series include ISO 14001 standard, which provides guidelines for the establishment or improvement of an EMS. The standard shares many common traits with its predecessor ISO 9000. So, as I talked earlier, both have a same format, but only the targets are different. So, the new series of ISO 14000 covers environmental management systems, environmental auditing, environmental performance evaluation, environmental labeling, life cycle assessment, environmental aspects in product standards. All these things will be covered in ISO 14000 series, but these will be having different nomenclature. They will be expressed with a different number. So, like ISO 14001, ISO 14002, ISO 14004, ISO 14010, ISO 14040, so on. Why have these standards and objectives? A set of international standards bring a worldwide focus to environment, encouraging a cleaner, safer, healthier world for us all. The existence of the standards allow organizations to focus environmental efforts against an internationally accepted criteria. And who do the standards apply to? The standards apply to all types and sizes of organizations and are designed to encompass diverse geographical, cultural, and social conditions. The standard does not establish absolute requirements for environmental performance. So, except for the commitment to continual improvement and compliance with applicable legislation and regulation. Now, what we are going to focus, it is about the continuation of the improvement. So, if you relate this statement which I just said, it is continuation in the improvement. Now, relate it with the sustainable development. So, more or less, both are having the same target. What we are actually heading towards? We are heading towards sustainable development. Our target is to obtain environmentally sustainable development in our industries and in our organizations, which is only possible if our environmental products or our environmental processes or our environmental services all are having compliance with the environmental management systems. We are having the minimum of the environmental negative impact on the system of all these activities. It's all about the designing, it's all about the product requirements, product designs, it's all about the services. What we are heading is actually our sustainable development goals, which is only achievable if we have a continuation in the improvement. For example, if we as we talked earlier as well, there is a loop starting with the policy, then having an assessment, initial assessment, then we are going to have a procedure for the reducing the negative impact, then then we have the evaluation, and then we have the mitigation, and then again the loop starts with the environmental policy. We need to again look into the policy whether we need to change it or it's going fine. So it's like a loop. For every change in the system, we are heading towards a further improvement in our system, and we are trying to get more and more sustainability. So we need a continuation, we need a closed loop. So please try to understand what our target is. So our target is sustainable development, which is not achievable without a continuation in the improvement. Please try to understand this phrase. In the end of every loop, we are going to assess our adopted methodology, our measures, our corrective measures. We need to modify if our performance is not up to our expectation. In that case, we will be again revising our whole procedure, starting from the first step, again reviewing the policy, making the team again, revising the team, improving the technical support, improving the design of the product, improving the operational unit operations within the industry, improving the process, improving the management, improving the operational management. Then in the end, the waste must be recycled so that maximum resources can be utilized as much as possible. And then again we will be evaluating how much loss we still are having in our end product. Is there any further improvement required or not? Then we will be again revising our loop. So this is the continuation of the improvement so that we can achieve sustainable development. So please, this is the summary of all our discussion. What do the standards apply to? So again, you can go through this. What does the ISO 14000 series cover? As I talked earlier, this series is going to have different formats, different categories to address. starting from the environmental management system, then covering the environmental auditing, then labeling, and then life cycle assessments, and then packaging, and all these things are going to have some standards which is defined by ISO 14000 organization itself. And now it has been documented, and that document is containing the guidelines, that those guidelines are supposed to be implemented by the industries. So let's review it. So starting with the first one, that is 14000, it is going to guide to environmental management principles and systems and supporting techniques. Then we have 14001, which is about the environmental management system specification with guidance for use. Then we have 14010, it is about guidelines for the environmental auditing, general principles for environmental auditing. Furthermore, there is some detailed description about these environmental auditing, about the audit procedures in the format of 14011. We have 14012, again related to the environmental auditing, but it is covering the qualification criteria for the environmental auditors. So all these are the guidelines which are required to achieve a certificate for the relevant nomenclature: 14011, 14012, 14010, anything which is required. So more the certifications, the more reliable the organization and its environmental performance becomes. So then we have labeling, which is covered in 14020 and 23. Please go through all these numbers and nomenclatures and their specific purpose and their title and its descriptions, what it is developed for, what it is requirement. So please go through it. I think we have already gone through. Please just for the revision. So if you see the nomenclature, it is representing different aspects of our evaluation. For example, it covers the evaluation and auditing tools, it covers the management system standards, and it covers the product support tools. So we have standards for all these three formats. So official source of the standards, as we have talked earlier, the organization has specifically described the specific nomenclature for everything, like auditing, like labeling, like LCA, life cycle assessment, and like EMS, environmental management system. And then the standard documentation has been prepared by ISO for all these specific formats. Those documentation is actually including the guidelines. So we have a huge number of documents which have been prepared so far. We are only have to follow those guidelines in order to achieve a particular certificate. So please go through these documents. We have already covered these topics. Now how we are going to apply this ISO 14001 particularly? So it consists of these major factors. It is about planning, and then acting, like do, and then check, and then act, and then CI. So plan is about establishing the objective and processes required. Doing is about implement and processes. Check is about the measure and monitor the processes and report results. Then act is about take action to improve performance of EMS based on the results. Continual improvement process, CI, is the last step of the whole methodology. And in this CI, we will be observing the performance of our adopted processes and methodologies, and then we will try to revise it with a much more efficient method so that we can improve our sustainability. So establishing all, now we will be talking about it one by one. There is an initial review which is required, and or gap analysis of the organization and processes and products is recommended. Future operations that may interact with the environment must be considered and investigated. Environmental aspect can include both direct, such as those used during manufacturing, and indirect, such as raw materials. This review assists the organization in establishing their environmental objectives, goals, and targets. Then how we are going to implement. So in this case, we will be talking about the identification of the resources required and the work out those members of the organization which will be responsible for the EMS implementation and control. If you review it, the whole sequence, we have talked about it earlier in our starting lectures, and then we talked about the assessment methodologies. So now this is the assessment methodology through which we are going to assess the efficiency of our method which we have adopted. So only one documented procedure is specified related to the operational control. Other procedures are required to foster better management control over elements such as documentation control, emergency preparedness and response, and the education of the employees. So communication and participation across all levels of the organization, especially top management, is a vital part of the implementation phase, with the effectiveness of the EMS being dependent on active involvement from all the employees. Now this is the monitoring process. Measure and monitor the processes and report result. So during the check stage, performance is monitored, periodically measured to ensure the organization's environmental targets. Internal audits are conducted to take action to improve EMS based on the result. Now, again, this is about the continual improvement. As we talked earlier, these recommendations are incorporated through continual improvement. So the plan is supposed to be revisited, the actions are needed to be reviewed so that we can improve wherever there is some loophole or wherever there is some discrepancies observed during this phase of uh, measuring and monitoring. So we need to develop those requirements and actions which can help improving the EMS. So and that is done by the CI, continual improvement. So this is the phase which we are talking, continual improvement process. And this case we will be having some modifications as suggested in the previous phase. Expansion, more and more business areas get covered by the implemented EMS. Enrichment, more and more activities, products, processes, emissions, resources are supposed to be uh, managed by the implemented EMS. And then upgradation of the systems. So now summary of the benefits. Framework for better management control that can result in reducing their environmental impact. Of course, we need to develop a framework and with the target to get better management control. In addition to improvement in performance, organizations can reap a number of economic benefits, including higher conformance with legislative and regulatory requirements. By minimizing the risk of regulatory and environmental liabilities, fines, and improving an organization's efficiency. So, and then reduction in the waste, consumption of resources or operating costs. So, as it is in globally accepted standard, it will minimize the local requirements of most of the countries with which the trade is being done. So this is another benefit, so that we can have a global certification which is globally accepted. There has been a push in the last decade by the consumer of companies to adopt this, make the incorporation of ISO 14001 smart approach for long-term viability of business. So it will have a positive impact on the assets as well as a positive impact on the environment. So please go through these procedures. Conformity assessment. So it can be used for full alignment or conformity with the international standards, and then make a self-determination and self-declaration, seek confirmation, and then of its conformance by the parties having an interest in the organization, and then a self-declaration by a party external to the organization. So it is again, I think, kind of repetition. Please go through it. And then this is the goal of EMS: compliance, waste reduction, feature of environmental management system. So we have talked about all these points. It is just requested to please go through this these slides thoroughly. So this is the graphical representation of the loop which we talked earlier, which consists of planning, doing, and then checking and measuring, and monitoring, and then acting, and then again having a revision in the form of CI. So first of all, starting with the policy, then objectives, and then implement a program, correct the problems, review the system. We have talked about it. Please just go through. This is again the same cycle. This is about the planning, the assessment like activity, and then aspect and its impact, evaluating the significance, so whether low or high, then data analysis tools. All these things we have covered, just explained more in detail. Checking the measures, management, the review. So this is the benefits and the concerns. So we have talked about the benefits, like international standards help level the playing field. So we have a similarity in all among all the industries on a global level. Then there is lesser repetition, and then satisfying the stakeholders' interest, and lower insurance rates, internal benefits, reduced cost, pollution prevention. All these are the benefits of the implementation of ISO 14001, and the concerns are not so much, and then it's only about the increased cost. But in the end you will observe that this increased cost is being repaid. We will have a payback of this concern. Then create trade barriers, because unless you are authorized, you are certified, you cannot do business. So somehow it is hindering the freedom of conducting business in one way. Does not ensure better environmental performance. It is only certification. It is not going to ensure the methods how to improve the environmental performance. But still, if we are going to have a continual improvement, in that case we will be having this environmental better performance as well. Then the registration issues, and then that's all. So please go through these slides. It was a basic introduction about the ISO 14000 series and EMS journaling. These are very common slides. You can find so many other sources of this information as well. So I will suggest you to please go through some other literature available, and so that you can have a broader aspect. The real challenge is its implementation in the industry. So as we have already working on the assignments, the mini class projects, you are already working. So it is important to understand how you are implementing this ISO 14000 in your assignment. So next time we will continue this topic with a more practical approach, and try to understand how this ISO 14000 is being implemented by all of you in the relevant industry which has been assigned to you as a mini class project. So hopefully you will get prepared, you will be more specific about the implementation of ISO 14000 and EMS, and what is its significance, how we can adopt and implement this in our specific industry. So please next time come well prepared, so that we can have a discussion on this topic in detail. So this is about the study, detailed study next time, and then we will close this topic. Thank you very much.